There are certain chapters in a man's life he doesn't talk about easily, not because the memories have faded, but because they remain too sharp, too raw. I used to think of myself as pragmatic, someone who measured people by their actions and adjusted accordingly. But then there was Anna. She dismantled every rule I thought I lived by, and in her wake left me piecing together a version of myself I hardly recognized. I met her at a friend's dinner party, one of those evenings where conversation flows too easily with wine. She wasn't loud, she wasn't even the center of attention, but she had a gravity about her, the kind that pulled your gaze across the room when you swore you wouldn't look again. Her laughter was soft, almost hesitant, but it carried. And when she spoke, it was as if each word was dipped in meaning, even if she was only talking about the weather. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless, just a fleeting attraction, the kind you feel and then tuck away. But the night ended with her jacket forgotten over the back of a chair and me chasing her down the street to return it. We walked together for blocks, the city humming around us, neither of us eager to part ways. When she finally turned and smiled, it was the kind of smile that said, "You're already caught, whether you admit it or not." What began as late-night conversations quickly slipped into something deeper. She'd call me after midnight, her voice tired but alive, asking questions that cut right into the core of who I was. "Do you ever feel like you're playing a part instead of living your life?" she asked once. I told her yes, though I had never admitted it to anyone before. With Anna, I said things I didn't know I'd been holding inside. The intimacy grew in stolen moments. A brush of her hand in a crowded room, the way she lingered too long when no one was looking, the texts that came at hours when neither of us should have been awake. I should mention, Anna wasn't single. She lived with a man she'd been with for years, and everyone who knew her believed they were inseparable. That knowledge should have stopped me, but instead, it lit a dangerous fire. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that whatever was broken between them existed long before me. But deep down, I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross. The first time we kissed was in her car, parked in an empty lot on the edge of town. Rain hammered against the windshield, and she looked at me with a mixture of fear and hunger, like she was teetering on the edge of a cliff. "If we do this," she whispered, "there's no going back." I kissed her anyway, and in that moment the world collapsed into nothing but her warmth, her taste, the sound of her breath against my cheek. After that there was no pretending. We became reckless. Afternoon escapes, secret hotel rooms, excuses to vanish from the lives we were supposed to be living. She would tell me stories about him, how distant he'd become, how the silence in their apartment felt like suffocation. I listened, half out of sympathy, half because it justified what we were doing. But even then, some part of me wondered if she tailored those stories for my benefit. There were moments when guilt clawed at me, when I thought about the man waiting for her at home. But every time I tried to pull back, she'd draw me in again with a look, a word, a touch that promised something larger than either of us could control. It was intoxicating, and I was addicted. The turning point came one evening when she called me, her voice shaking. "He suspects something," she said. My chest tightened, panic mixing with desire. I asked her if she wanted to stop, to end it before it destroyed us both. There was a pause, then her quiet answer, "I can't." Neither could I. What I didn't know then was that Anna's world, and mine, were about to unravel in ways I could never have imagined. When Anna told me he suspected, I thought she meant suspicion in the vague way people do, offhand remarks, long looks, tension in the air. But a week later she called again, her voice thin with fear. "He followed me today," she whispered. "He knows something." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified, the tick of the clock, the groan of the pipes, the faint traffic below. I kept picturing him standing in the shadows, watching us, waiting. Guilt pressed in on me, but alongside it there was something darker, the thrill of danger. It was no longer just an affair, it was a secret war fought in silence. Anna became jumpier. When we met, she kept glancing over her shoulder, her hands trembling when she touched mine. Still, she couldn't stay away. "I don't love him the way I love you," she said once, her eyes desperate, searching my face for belief. And God help me, I believed her, even though some part of me wondered if those words had ever belonged to him, too. One night she arrived at my place unannounced, rain dripping from her coat, mascara smudged from crying. "We fought," she said, collapsing into my arms. "He asked if there was someone else. I told him no, but—" Her voice broke. I held her close, my heart torn between rage at the man who made her cry and shame at the role I played in the tears. We spent the night tangled together, her body pressed desperately against mine, as if making love could drown out the lies. But in the morning I caught a look in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not regret, not fear, something more complicated, something I couldn't name. The next few weeks blurred into a dangerous rhythm. She would come to me with stories of fights at home, nights spent in cold silence, mornings filled with tension. And each time she insisted I was her escape, her salvation. Yet I began noticing cracks in the narrative. A phone call she cut short. A bruise on her arm she refused to explain. A night she promised to come but never showed, later claiming she had fallen asleep. Doubt crept in slowly, like water seeping through a crack in the foundation. I wanted to trust her, but trust is fragile when it's built on betrayal. Still, every time she smiled at me, every time she whispered that I was the only one who truly saw her, I convinced myself to ignore the questions clawing at my mind. Then came the night that changed everything. I was leaving the office late, the building nearly empty, when I saw him. Anna's partner, David. He was waiting by my car, rain soaking his jacket, his expression unreadable. My heart stuttered, but I forced myself forward. "Michael Wright?" he asked, his voice calm, too calm. "Yes," I said cautiously. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "Anna talks about you." The air left my lungs, my thoughts scrambled for footing. "She does." He nodded slowly. "Says you're different, that you understand her." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I have to admit I wanted to hate you, but the truth is, maybe you're exactly what she needs." The words left me frozen. This wasn't anger, this wasn't accusation. It was something else entirely, acceptance. Permission. I couldn't tell. Before I could reply, he turned and walked away, leaving me in the rain with more questions than answers. When I told Anna what happened, her reaction startled me. Instead of fear, instead of shock, she looked almost relieved. "Maybe he won't fight it," she said quietly. "Maybe he's letting me go." But I couldn't shake the image of his eyes, cold, calculating, not at all the gaze of a man surrendering his love. There was something darker behind that smile, something waiting. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just caught in a love affair. I was caught in something far more dangerous. After that night in the rain, I couldn't stop replaying David's words. The way he spoke, measured, calm, almost amused, didn't match the situation. If I had been in his place, I would have exploded, demanded the truth, maybe thrown a punch. But he hadn't. He'd simply acknowledged me as if I were part of some plan he had already accepted. Anna tried to reassure me. "He doesn't love me the way he used to," she insisted. "He's tired. We've been drifting for years." She said it with such conviction that I almost believed her. But there was a flicker in her eyes when she spoke of him, something unspoken, something sharp. My paranoia grew. At night, I thought I heard footsteps behind me on empty streets. Sometimes I caught sight of a figure in a crowd, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar, only for it to vanish when I turned. I told myself it was imagination, but deep down, I knew David wasn't done with me. Then one evening, Anna called me, her voice low and urgent. "Don't come to my place anymore," she whispered. "He's watching. He knows more than he says." "Then leave him," I pleaded. "Come stay with me." Silence stretched on the line. Finally, she said, "It's not that simple." It never was with Anna. She thrived in complications, in the tangled spaces between choices. And I, God help me, I followed her there, convinced love was worth the labyrinth. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I was at her apartment, a place we usually avoided unless we were certain David wouldn't be home. She swore he was out of town. We were in her bedroom, the air heavy with the scent of her perfume, when the front door slammed. Anna froze. My chest went cold. "Stay here," she whispered, slipping out before I could stop her. I sat there, heart hammering, listening to muffled voices, his deep and steady, hers tense and sharp. I couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm. Accusation, denial, then a sudden silence that pressed against the walls like a storm about to break. Minutes later she returned, pale and trembling. "You have to go," she said, shoving my jacket into my hands. "What happened?" I demanded. Her eyes darted toward the door. "Please just go." I left, but the unease followed me like a shadow. That night, I half expected David to show up at my apartment, but he never did. Instead, a letter arrived 2 days later. No return address, just my name written in sharp, deliberate strokes. Inside was a single sentence: "You don't know her like I do." My blood ran cold. When I showed it to Anna, she denied everything. "He's trying to scare you," she insisted. "He knows he's losing me, and this is how he fights." But there was a crack in her voice, and her hands shook as she crumpled the paper. For the first time, I began to wonder if I was the one being played, not just by David, but by Anna too. Because love, I realized, can be a mask, and the face beneath hers was one I wasn't sure I'd recognize. The letter was the turning point. Until then, I'd convinced myself I was in control, that what Anna and I shared was real, worth fighting for. But staring at those words, "You don't know her like I do," I felt the foundation crack. I tried to shake it off, but David's voice echoed in my head. What if he wasn't just trying to scare me? What if he was telling the truth? I began paying closer attention. I noticed how Anna's stories shifted depending on the day. One evening, she claimed she and David hadn't spoken for days. The next, she mentioned a conversation they'd had over breakfast. Sometimes she swore she wanted to leave him. Other times she said it wasn't possible because of things I wouldn't understand. I started to feel like a guest in my own life, watching pieces of a puzzle being scattered deliberately out of reach. The breaking moment came late one night when my phone buzzed with a message from Anna. "Come over. Urgent." Against my better judgment, I went. Her apartment was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, her face pale, her hands twisting nervously. "He knows everything," she whispered. "He found my messages, he knows about us." My stomach knotted. "Then come with me, right now. We'll leave, start over somewhere else." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. He won't let me go." "What do you mean?" I pressed. But before she could answer, the front door creaked open. David stood there, calm as ever, his eyes flicking between us. For a moment the room was frozen. Then he smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that chilled me to the bone. "So this is the man you've staked everything on," he said quietly. "Interesting choice." Anna's hand gripped mine, trembling. "David, please." "Save it," he cut her off. His gaze shifted to me. "Tell me, Michael, do you really believe she's been honest with you, that she's told you the whole truth?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. He chuckled softly. "Did she tell you about the money, about the debts, about why she can't leave?" Anna's eyes widened in panic. "Stop it," she cried. But the seed was already planted. My mind raced with every inconsistency, every unanswered question. Money, debts, what else had she hidden? David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't know her like I do. You never will." The tension was unbearable. Anna pulled me toward the door. "Go," she whispered urgently. "Just go." I stumbled into the night, my chest burning, my thoughts unraveling. I didn't sleep at all. Her face haunted me, beautiful, desperate, deceptive. And for the first time since it began, I asked myself if I loved Anna, or if I loved the illusion she had created. The night after David confronted me, I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling, unable to breathe under the weight of everything. His words played in my head like a curse. You don't know her like I do. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was right. I had built Anna into a savior, someone who gave meaning to my restless, lonely life. But what if she wasn't a savior at all? What if she was simply a storm, and I had walked willingly into its path? The next morning, Anna showed up at my door. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair disheveled, her voice hoarse. "I left him," she said, as though it were that simple. "I can't do it anymore. I want to be with you." Part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to take her inside, kiss her, tell her we could finally be free. But another part, colder, sharper, hesitated. "What about the debts?" I asked quietly. Her face went still. "What debts?" "The ones David mentioned." For a heartbeat, her mask slipped. Panic flashed in her eyes, then she laughed too quickly. "He's lying. He'll say anything to poison you against me." But I saw it, the flicker of truth she couldn't hide. And in that moment I understood she had been using me. Maybe not at first, maybe once she had loved me in her own way. But somewhere along the line I had become a pawn in whatever game she and David were playing. "Anna," I said, my voice breaking, "what aren't you telling me?" She looked at me with tears brimming, but they felt rehearsed, practiced. "I love you," she whispered. "Isn't that enough?" It should have been. God, I wanted it to be. But love without truth is just another form of betrayal. I stepped back. "No," I said, "it's not." Her tears spilled then, real or fake. I'll never know. She begged, pleaded, cursed, until finally she left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I collapsed against it, my chest hollow, my heart in shreds. Days turned into weeks. I never saw Anna again. Rumors reached me she and David moved away, or maybe they split, or maybe they never split at all. I stopped asking. Some wounds only deepen when you press them. But even now, years later, I sometimes wake in the dark, her face vivid in my mind. The way she smiled when she thought no one was watching. The way her hand fit so perfectly in mine. The way her lies felt like truths I wanted to believe. I don't know if I ever knew the real Anna. Maybe I never will. But what I do know is this: betrayal doesn't always come like a thunderclap. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, disguised as love, until one day you realize the person you trusted most was the one who unmade you. And that realization stays with you forever.